Let's look briefly at an explanation of the terms on page 375 and 376. We need to know what these mean and how to deal with them in Excel and how they affect our parameters in our different financial functions. The first thing that's talked about is a down payment. I think most of us are familiar with that. That's money required from the borrower toward the purchase of an asset. You pay that money up front. So for instance, the example they use in the book is a $200,000 value on a house. Typically, a bank is not going to loan you the entire value because you might move out without paying any payments and you might cause thousands of dollars of damage to the house. So they need to get some of that money up front to prevent heavy losses should something bad happen from the borrower. So a $200,000 value home, let's say they required a 10% down payment. This would mean that we're not going to be able to borrow the entire $200,000. That would mean we are going to borrow $200,000 minus 10%. So we would only be able to borrow 90% of $200,000, which would be $180,000. How do we deal with the down payment? We simply adjust our present value to reflect the actual amount that we're borrowing. We do not include the down payment. We would subtract the down payment from that value of the home. The next term that's mentioned is a balloon payment. A balloon payment is additional money that is owed at the end of a loan. This often allows a borrower to make much lower payments, but they're going to have to pay an additional large payment at the end of that loan. Let's say a borrower needed $15,000 for a car, and they could get the money at 3% interest, paying monthly payments for 3 years. So our rate would be 3% divided by the number of payments, because remember, this is a rate per period. And then the number of periods is going to be 12 payments times 3 years. So that would be 36 number of periods. And our present value, the amount we're borrowing, is $15,000. That monthly payment would turn out to be $436.22. However, if there were a balloon payment of $2,000 required at the end of a loan, what we do is we say that balloon payment becomes a negative future value, So when we write the formula, instead of saying our future value is 0, we're actually going to owe $2,000 at the end of that time, so we would list that as a negative future value, which says, oh, you can pay only $386 a month for 3 years, but then you're going to have to come up with $2,000 cash. But then you're going to have to come up with $2,000 cash at the end of the 3 years' time. The third idea discussed are fees, such as points, loan origination fees, etc. These are amounts the borrowers must often pay up front in order to borrow money. For instance, if I'm a bank and I'm going to loan $200,000 on a house or $180,000 on a house, I'm not going to do that for nothing. I'm not going to do that just for the interest, because you may only own the house for a year and I'm not going to make much interest. I'm going to charge some upfront fees that are fairly substantial. Points refer to percentage points. For instance, if we were going to borrow money, we might be able to get it at 4% with no points. But they might say, if you'll pay an extra point, 1% of the amount borrowed, we'll give you that loan for 3.5%. So if I were borrowing $180,000 and they said for 1 point That would be 1% of that, which would be $1,800. Pay us an extra $1,800 now, and we'll only charge you 3.5% on the loan instead of 4%. How would I know if that's a good idea? I would figure out how much am I saving on my monthly payment every month with that lower interest rate. How many months would it take me to save $1,800? If I think I'm going to be in the house that long, then that's worth it. If I'm not sure I'm going to be in the house that long, then I don't want to pay that extra money up front. Typically, there's an origination fee of several $1,000s on a loan this size, and that prevents people from just borrowing money or refinancing all the time, because every time you refinance, you're going to have to pay several $1,000s to originate that loan again. Now, if the interest rate drops by at least 2%, generally it's worth those fees to refinance your home at a significantly lower interest rate. The example given in the book says, if we borrowed $200,000 at 5% annually, we're making monthly payments, so 5% divided by 12 is the rate per period. We're going to do it for 15 years, so the number of periods would be 15 years times 12 payments a year, 180 payments over the next 15 years, and our present value is $200,000. That would mean our monthly payment is going to be almost $1,600 to pay off that loan. What if this loan requires a 2-point fee, 2% of the loan paid in advance, and an additional $500 origination fee totaling $4,500? If this is the case, the actual amount being borrowed is not $200,000 if we're rolling that in. They're saying you're borrowing $200,000, but we're going to charge you 2 points. So if you're borrowing $200,000, 1% would be $2,000, 2% would be $4,000, and then they're going to charge you an extra $500 just because we can, and we know you want this money, and we want to loan it to you, but we want to make some money too. So we are spending $4,500 that is not going toward the house. It is going toward those fees. Now, if a person doesn't have the $4,500, they will usually roll it into the loan amount, and what's happening there is you're paying interest on those fees for 15 years. It would be much better to pay those fees in cash, save up the cash to pay the fees, but if you don't have it, you don't have it. To finish this example, we're saying, what's the rate that we're actually paying if we borrow $195,000? How do we get that? We take the $200,000 minus the $4,000 for the 2%, the 2 points, minus the $500 for the loan origination fee. We're borrowing $195,500. We're actually paying this much as our payment, the $1,581.55. We're doing it for this long. That will return the rate per period, and then we'd multiply it times 12 periods a year to tell us the annual rate, which would actually be not 5%, but more like 5.35%. So that's what we're actually paying for the money we're borrowing for the house.